Okay, I think this was on social media, but it says this: what do you say to the idea of changing the methods of ministering to people from the Jesus movement days to a different method because of the change in our culture? I heard a pastor speak about this who grew up during that time, and he used the verse for harvesting and planting. He said back then was a harvest time, and now we need to change methods because it's a planting time and people are not as open or know anything about the Bible.
I think you use whatever method is effective. Jesus didn't use one method in reaching people, and so when he was talking to Nicodemus, he has a conversation with Nicodemus that is a completely different type of conversation than he has with the woman at the well, which is a completely different conversation than he has with Zacchaeus, a completely different conversation than he has with the Pharisees. And so I think that the methods that we use to reach people need to be something that's effective. The thing that we always need to watch out for, a lot of times when people are talking about methods, they're not talking about the method, they're talking about the message. And the message needs to never change. And the message is that Christ has come and he's lived a perfect life, and he deserves heaven and I don't. And he gives up his right to heaven and takes up my punishment so that I can have his right to heaven. And that's a central fact of the gospel, and the fact that we need to follow God. We need to repent of our sin, and we need to begin actually following Christ and obey God. That is a message that never changes. As far as the methods go, I don't do what I did when I was a kid in the 70s when I'm sharing with people. I am completely aware well, you know what? I think sometimes when people are thinking about the methods that were used during the Jesus movement, I think sometimes they don't understand what was actually going on, because a lot of people did not know very much about the Bible. And I understand that a lot of these guys came out of the 50s and they grew up in the kind of cultural Christianity type of situation. So it is a little bit different. But I knew nothing about the Bible when I got saved. So the people that you're talking about that know very little about the Bible, that's exactly what I was. And I got saved in 1975. I knew nothing. And the methods that were used were completely relevant for me. The guy gets up, teaches a Bible study. I'm blown away that a 2,000-year-old book has any kind of relevance for me. I was literally looking at my Bible going, how is this, how is this being something that's impacting me? This is a 2,000-year-old book. I was just blown away by the guy. And, then he talks about my sin and Jesus' righteousness and the whole thing. And the whole thing was absolutely impacting on my life. And that was my pastor, Greg Laurie, that was doing that. So I don't know that, a lot of times people will use concerts, or during the Jesus movement, we use concerts. So we'd invite somebody to a concert, and that's a method. And I think that sometimes that can still be, fruitful. But around here, we don't use concerts to try to reach people. There are other things that we do. And so one of the things that we just did this month is we had like a Christmas variety show. It was Brandon's idea. And so what he wanted to do was play Christmas music and have comedy skits in between. And like 15 people got saved, and it's like, I just got up and shared the gospel afterwards, and all these people gave their lives to the Lord. And it was hilarious, and it was fun, and it was well done, and that kind of thing. Not something that we would have done in the 70s, but that's kind of where our church is at. So you do whatever you need to do to reach people. Some of the most effective things that get used around here are the women's Christmas dinner. Ladies always get saved at that thing, and just some of the fellowship stuff. And the most effective thing is people inviting their friends on Sunday morning. They come in on Sunday morning and they get saved.
Prophecy update's a big one too.
Yeah, prophecy update, that gets used a lot. And so, but generally just the preaching of the word. When I teach the Bible, not every single time, but many times I'm giving an invitation. During the Bible study, I'm talking to people, to Christians, and not just Christians, but generally Christians, about their walks with God and using the passage for that. But somewhere in there, I'm always giving an opportunity for people to respond to the call of God in their life. And so, just do what you need to do to get the message out.
So you already addressed, Jesus talked to people on an individual level because everybody's heart's different, and he always went after their heart, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then you grew up in the 70s out of the Jesus movement. You didn't know anything about the Bible. Do you think that the culture as a whole, painting with a broad brush, as you like to say, where hardness of hearts are in that place now, where people are like anti-Bible, anti-God, where in the 70s they might have not have known some stuff, but they were still kind of open? Or
actually, when you're talking about the hippie movement and stuff, when you go back and you look at what was going on during the 60s, they were anti-God.
Yeah.
You had some groups that were, singing songs about Jesus and stuff, but I'm talking about secular groups, Spirit in the Sky and all that stuff. It's where I'm going to go when I die, and all of that stuff. And you had some of that stuff, but there was some real animosity towards church and Christians and that kind of thing. The Beatles famously said that they were more popular than Jesus Christ. So there's there's a bunch of stuff going on during the 70s and the 60s that I don't think that people are considering. Basically, the reason that a lot of the Jesus movement took place is because you had a bunch of people who turned away from a relationship with God and biblical Christianity. They went after Eastern cults, Eastern religions, that kind of thing, and drugs, and tune out, turn on, and I can't remember what the rest of that was, but they went after drugs and that kind of stuff, and the lifestyle just trashed them. And so there they are, trashed, and no hope, and so people came in and started sharing Christ with them, and a lot of these guys are literally homeless. They're wandering around. So real opportunity for Christians to be able to share the gospel. Well, we've got exactly the same situation going on now. We've got a whole generation that has been taught that Christianity is something false and something that you don't even need to consider, and that kind of thing, and they're reaping the consequences of that. Lots of people reaping consequences right now, and their lives are trashed, and they're pretty pitiful, and they're pretty hopeless. Suicide rates, skyrocketing. Yeah, and so that's hopelessness.
So is homelessness.
Yeah.
Look at Seattle; they have whole budgets trying to fix the homeless problem.
Right, and so that's an open opportunity to be able to share the gospel with people who need it. And so I wouldn't paint any of this with a broad brush, and so there are times when I'm talking to somebody who's just not interested in the things of God, and it's like I pray for them, and like you said in your note or in your email, maybe it's a time for planting, and yeah, absolutely. And so if I got somebody who's hardened, then what I want to do is plant the seed. But I don't want to leave out the idea that people can come to Christ. I was an assistant pastor, and back in the 80s, and my pastor that was over me just had the attitude that America had the gospel preached to them, and they'd rejected it, and so there was really no point anymore. And
so what did he do? What was his mission on a Sunday morning?
He just taught the word, and that was basically it. And a lot of times he had a bad attitude. That's what he had. And there were times when his sermons were just real downers, and he had a heart for missions, and that was good, and that's where most of his focus was, because he, when you go out on a mission, lots of people respond, and he thought that maybe that's what God was doing, and he was done with the United States. Thought that everybody knew the gospel, and that is not what I've ever found.
Yeah.
Most of the times when I talk to people about what the gospel actually, they have no clue.
No idea
what the gospel is. They have no clue what the Bible says about salvation. And so when they get a clue, they can either accept it or they can reject it. But I think that everybody needs an opportunity to hear about Jesus and about what he's done for us. And so I've always been like that. If I'm dealing with somebody that's hardened and isn't receiving the word, the Bible talks about breaking up your fallow ground. That's a guy who needs to be plowed. And so you plow them, and so there have been times when I've gotten, and again, I'm from a construction background. There have been times that I've plowed guys in the sense of gotten on them about stuff, and it's been effective. And then after they're plowed, then you can plant some seeds, and so then there are people who are ready for seeds, and then there are people who are ready to reap, and you just pay attention to which part you're doing, and it's going to be a combination of those things. So
Okay.
Don't give up on sharing the gospel, man. Don't give up on that.